Well, we finished up in our little mini-series of the Reed family, and before we go a little further down military, let's just go across the street to this home here. This is on the corner of Mini and Military, 1905 Military to be exact. The original land that this home was built on was owned by Joseph Mini, and he was one of the early developers of Port Huron. The home was built by Albert Valentine, but he never lived in it as his wife died during the construction, and he couldn't face moving in without her at his side. Albert Valentine was part of the Valentine family that owned the Valentine Dry Goods Company. And most of us in my generation remember it right here in this corner. But when Albert Valentine was building the house for his wife, the store was actually across the street in this building here. And if you recall, S.L. Valentine and his brother David went to work for C.P. Noyes in this building in the late 1800s. And they eventually bought him out and established the first Valentine store at this location. Now where Albert Valentine comes in, I'm not quite sure. I know David died. And it could have been David's son that took over for him, or it could have been S.L.'s son. But somehow they were related, and eventually he became the proprietor of the business as well. After Albert's wife died, he moved elsewhere, but the home remained in the family for a few years. Then it was sold to Peter O'Neill. He was the proprietor of O'Neill Brothers and Company, who was a importer. They had a store on the 200 block of Huron Avenue. We looked at them in previous videos. But it was a China store, and they sold other things, and they also sold groceries. Here's a photo of the inside of the store. Peter's brother Frank was also a very prominent person in Port Huron. He was mayor of Port Huron for 2 terms and was also a co-owner of the store. This is a photograph of where the O'Neill Brothers store would be located today. And the gray building on the left was the original store, and then they expanded. They took up that whole corner, including the building on the right as well. Of course, back then it would have looked like this. I also come across a couple of ads for the O'Neill Brothers store. And it appears that they specialized in tea. They called this the Yokohama Tea Store. And not only was it a tea store, but the pictures in these couple ads usually describe a different product. For example, this one here is advertising Niagara Cloth Starch, whatever that is. And in this ad, we see the Yokohama Tea Store advertised again. And then this picture here represents a different product. Use Acme soap, cut full pounds, versus we don't cut you full pounds? Best bar soap made. In 1925, O'Neill sold the home to Frank D. Jinks. Now, Frank Jinks was a brother of William Jinks, who wrote the history of St. Clair County, a tremendous resource if anybody wants to know the history of the city. Frank Jinks was known mainly as a lumberman. That's where he made most of his money originally. And the area between 10th Street and 7th Street was filled with lumber mills. On the right-hand side, the north side, you can see by this map, nearest the 10th Street Bridge was the Haynes lumber mill. And then just to the right of that, you will see the Jinks lumber mill. And at the time of the map, he was in with his partners, Taylor and Howard, as well. In this photo here, you can see the 10th Street Bridge in the distance. And then this first set of logs here, that would be belong to the Jinks lumber mill, and then further down would have been the Haynes lumber mill. Jinks later teamed up with Russell Wade to form the Jinks Wade Company, which was a cement company, and they built sidewalks and did concrete work of all kinds. He also went into real estate, and he was president of the Port Huron Terminal Company. And if that wasn't enough, he became president of the Port Huron Duluth Steamship Company, and here you see one of his ships. the Lakeport. I wonder where he got a name like that. So you can see that this house here had some pretty prominent people living in it at one time or another. Alright, let's go on down Military Street and see what else there is. As we go further south, we come to this overpass and these buildings on the left-hand side. And as a boy, I remember going over this, and my dad was always saying, well, there's a railroad tunnel that goes underneath the river. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. I looked to my left, I didn't see anything. I looked to my right, I didn't see anything. Never did see the tunnel. As a boy, in class at school, for a field outing, they did take us from the tunnel station. We boarded a train like this, and we went through the tunnel, and then we came back to Port Huron, but never really did see the tunnel. I never really got a look at the tunnel until my dad and I, and by that time I was an adult, we wanted to go down and see where the old roundhouse was. It was no longer there, but we wanted to see where it was, and I think the turntable would still be there, he said, so we did that. In this photograph here, if you look over to the right, I'll zoom in on it, you can see a portion of the roundhouse anyway. You can't see the turntable. The turntable is set inside the roundhouse, not inside, but it was, well, let me just show you a picture, it'd be easier than explaining it. Here's a diagram or a plan of the roundhouse, the Grand Trunk Roundhouse in Port Huron. And you can see the tracks going in, and then you can see all those individual tracks going into the roundhouse where they could go in for service. And the turntable there is in the center. And as the trains came in, and of course they would be turned on the turntable, you go back out on the return trip. Back during the steam era, these engines had to be turned around to make the return trip. Today they don't have to be. And that's why you don't see roundhouses anymore. Here you can see one of the Grand Trunk Western Railway engines going into the roundhouse, and you can see the different stalls. Every stall had a different set of doors, of course. And in this picture here, you get a little better look at the turntable. All right, let me ask you a question. How many would like to see a real steam engine turning on the turntable? Raise your hand. All right, that's several of you. Okay, I just happen to have a film clip here that we can take a look at. This, of course, isn't the Port Huron Roundhouse, but they're putting on a show here to show how the steam engines turned back in the day, and got a lot of the folks watching it there. So we'll just watch it here for a second or two. Kind of like watching grass grow or paint dry. Speed it up a little bit. And away we go, right into the roundhouse. After the steam era, the roundhouse became just a shadow of what it used to be. You can see here it's pretty bad shape. So back to my dad and I, when we went down to look it over, all that was left was basically this right here, the turntable. I'm not even sure this much of it was left, but I do remember walking across the turntable. And I thought that was pretty neat. Well, I said all that to say this. That field trip with my father was the first time I ever saw the St. Clair Tunnel. And to be honest with you, I wasn't overly impressed. But I soon became impressed when I found out it was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Just look at this picture here. You can see in that bottom right-hand corner, along with all the other ancient wonders, is the St. Clair Tunnel. Okay, you caught me. There might be a little Photoshop involved here, but it certainly would have been considered one of the 7 wonders of the world as far as the 1800s were concerned. It was an amazing feat, an amazing story. Join me in my next video when I tell that story.